We go on now. Brandon Moreno steps away from MMA. He did not retire. There's no suspension, no significant injury. He's just good at the moment. What did you think of this decision? Seems kind of rather refreshing to hear an athlete just take time off, but not refer to it as a retirement. Danny Segura.
It was a surprise, but I would say I didn't really have like a shock factor after the fact. It was a surprise because I didn't see it coming, but once he said what he said, it all made sense. And I do think that this is the right move for Brandon Moreno. I don't feel like this is talked about enough, but like, we always talk about mileage and damage. Dude, Brandon Moreno has been going through the ringer time and time again in these championship fights. I mean, the Pantoja fight, in my opinion, was the fight of the year for 2023. The fights with Davidson Figueiredo were insane as well. I mean, the dude's just been back to back to back in very grueling fights, 25 minutes, a lot of damage. And even prior to that, he had a bit of a run as well where he had some tough fights. So I do think, I don't necessarily advise always fighters to take time off. I think is actually quite the opposite. But in this case, I think it makes sense. I think he is a bit far from the title right now because of the loss to Brandon Royval. So he's going to have to put together at least a couple wins. He doesn't have that immediate title shot looming. The division is going through a bit of a rough time right now. It needs to figure itself out. Take some time off. You deserve it. You're fortunately in a position that you can do that. A lot of fighters have to fight to make a living. I'd like to think that Brandon Moreno, being in so many championship fights, he's probably a bit set up to, be able to take a break and recoup. And everything that he said makes sense. His body's tired. His mind is tired. You not so long ago mentioned how, Alexa Grasso is now sort of the leader in Mexican MMA and Hispanic MMA. Well, Brandon was that, and he was that for so many years, and that's a heavy crown as well. So that's a lot of pressure, and he mentioned that as well. So I'm glad to see Brandon Moreno have that reflection, to take a step back, and I'm glad that this is not a permanent sort of retirement, and that he will come back eventually. So all the best to Brandon, and looking forward to his return.
Yeah, Goes and I interviewed him before his last fight, and when we asked him about, hey, fighting in Mexico, do you feel pressure? He just shook his head like, yeah, I feel it. Mm-hmm. It's heavy, and I bet you that also has something to do with it, man. He's kind of carried a nation, on his back a little bit. And granted, he's got a couple homies there with Yair Rodriguez, Alexa Grasso that can help usher in, Mexico, the PI, and the great athletes that they're going to produce. Nolan, I want to know, though, how does this affect the flyweight division? It's not the deepest out there, right? It's already kind of bare to begin with. What's the impact?
I mean, anytime you lose a contender, right, it's an issue. And a guy like Brandon Moreno is the perfect person that you can have some of these budding contenders fight to try to prove themselves at the top. So you never like to see a division lose a top contender when you're talking about the flow, when you're talking about just the divisional cycle there. But I do agree with Danny. I think for Brandon Moreno, he can't be thinking about that. He's going to prioritize himself. And I'd like to see fighters say, hey, mentally, physically, let me just take a little time off, recharge, et cetera, et cetera. So by no means am I saying he shouldn't be doing this, but yeah, I mean, especially right now where the flyweight division needs kind of stars. We have Pantoja fighting Ursig next, which I think surprised a lot of people. Not to say that Ursig's not a great fighter and that he wouldn't get there in a fight or two, but I think now that we're having somebody as low down in the rankings as he is jump up, I think it kind of shows what's going on here. And Makayev's kind of stalled a bit. Albazi, I believe, is hurt. Brandon Royval was hurt, and he just fought for the belt anyway. So things will figure themselves out. Guys will build off of each other. So I'm not putting flyweight in the grave by any means, but to me, Moreno taking time off, just there's one less piece of the puzzle for everybody to build off of. So good for him though. Hopefully he comes back charged up. He's had a crazy resume of fights in the last since he came back, really. I mean, from the start he was fighting top 10 guys, I believe. So good on him for being, I don't want to say brave enough, but for putting himself first, which I think sometimes fighters have trouble doing that.